Bill?
Yeah, nice formal name. Fox News stooge.
Glenn
Beck. Tom, I'm in agreement with you. The media in this country needs an enema. Every one of them. They need to be shook upside down and stuffed. And we need to deal with that problem. Because they're going to be dealt with when the government gets dealt with. And at some point, the government knows there's going to be an uprising by the American people. I've been told this repeatedly over the past month and a half by many people within the government, hierarchy. They are telling me, these are career employees, they are telling me the same thing. Once unemployment hits around 25%, it's over with. There's going to be an uprising. Now the question is when this uprising comes, are people going to be organized? Have they been sitting down with their fellow man forming their revolutionary councils? Those are private councils. That's your sister. That's your brother. That's your brother-in-law. Those are your family members. Those are your super close friends. Your revolutionary council. Who's going to put these illegal public officials in handcuffs? It's going to have to be the American people. We have the rule of law to do it. And the Declaration of Independence gives it to us. People are going to have to start getting ready. I'm going to tell you how they're going to put the salt on us. I'm going to tell you things tonight. Go ahead, Tom.
No, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Go ahead.
But, I mean, the Revolutionary Council is very important because what you have is at least twice a week you meet in your local church, your local school auditorium. You discuss how many firearms you all have, when it's time to rock and roll. Again, you store up on canned food. And what you have to identify immediately is your local, and I want people to listen to this very carefully. It's important to bring in your local law enforcement officers and explain to them what has to be done. Because these local law enforcement officers need to join the Revolutionary Council for the purpose of imposing and reimposing what we call constitutional reimplementation upon this country, which means when these idiots and misfits decide that they want to live under martial law or live under socialism or Nazism or communism, we're probably going to see all three here. If we haven't seen, we've already seen Nazism under Bush and semi-Marxism under Bush, which is basically Fabian socialism. Now we're seeing Marxist-Leninism under Obama, and we're probably going to see eventually Nazism under him too. So it's important to identify your local law enforcement officers and have them join the Revolutionary Councils. Because at that point, Stu, you can then bring forth a communication network among the Revolutionary Councils and the local law enforcement officers. And listen to this, folks. I want you all write this down out there. To declare state sovereignty, independence from a rogue, out-of-control federal government. And at that point, the Revolutionary Councils from all the states in the Union will be able to communicate through their local law enforcement officers and make it clear to the federal government and the criminals and Satanists in Washington, D.C., that they either do as they're told or face the wrath of the American people. I think that's a pretty good idea, don't you, Mr. Webb?
I think it's a very good idea. Now, I want to touch on a couple of things that I've been picking up on, Tom, from the intelligence world. Apparently, that there's so much rumor flying around on the internet and on radio talk shows about martial law is coming. Martial law is coming. Yes, it's coming. We're basically underneath it now, to a degree. They may not use federal agents. I mean, not federal agents, but troops, American troops or foreign troops. What they may do, and their contingency plan is, all worked up by Obama and his stooges inside the White House, the Israeli Mossad, they decide to use government employees, folks. Listen to this. Your new martial law may not be troops. It may be government employees. And what I mean by that is this. 60% of the workforce in America works for the government. 60%. 40% works for private or for corporations, and what's left of capitalism, entrepreneurs and free enterprise. They're going to take your trash man that works for the city. They're going to take your dog catcher that works for the city. They're going to take the clerk that works for the court. They're going to take the cops on the street. They're going to plan on taking everybody. And on one day, they're going to make a sweep, and they're going to pick up tens of millions of people, and they're going to say that these are people that refuse, quote unquote, to take the flu vaccination. So therefore, they have to be confined into a rehabilitation center in order to make sure that they take their flu shots to keep from spreading the flu. This is the latest contingency of the United States government to use every man and woman in government to arrest the other half. Now, that's a real tricky situation. You got half the American people out to arrest the other half of the American people all in one day. Make a sweep.
I think, Stu, that is if they're thinking of using that, I've heard the same report you have. I think it won't work. Because I think most
I don't think it's going to work either, Tom. I think there's enough people in government that are awake.
Most of these government employees are going to be too chicken shit to try to walk into a bar in Omaha, Nebraska, or walk into let's say a nightclub in Nashville, Tennessee, and start telling people, you take your flu vaccine because I'm going to tell you what the response is going to be. And you know that response is going to be, it's going to be a quick and early lesson in the Second Amendment.
Yep.
I repeat, folks, now remember, this flu is a military weapon. It was devised as a cross between bird and pigs. Birds and pigs, the swine flu, H1N1. It was released and allowed to get airborne in the military laboratories in Czechoslovakia and Austria. All done with the cooperation of the East German DVD, as I call it, the Israeli Mossad, and the criminal elements of U.S. intelligence inside the CIA, the P2 branch of the CIA, which is controlled by the Satanist, arch-criminal, nation wrecker of the highest order over the last half a century. His name is George Herbert Walker Bush. Let me repeat. We want to identify the enemy. His name is George Herbert Walker Bush. Am I right or wrong, Stu?
You're very correct. He's the kingpin here in America, folks. And, I've asked the question, Tom, many times, why this guy isn't in handcuffs. I've asked it repeatedly. Everybody says he's the boss hog. They won't put him in handcuffs. He's got too much money and too much power. This is what I've been told repeatedly.
He himself put his Alan Greenspan into the Federal Reserve. Again, I want to just repeat this for those who didn't listen last night. This individual, George Herbert Walker Bush, was photographed in Dealey Plaza the day of the assassination of President Kennedy, coordinated it with elements of British intelligence to kill the 35th President of the United States because he had issued Executive Order 11,110, which would have dismantled George Herbert Walker Bush's piggy bank, a.k.a. the Federal Reserve. George Herbert Walker Bush was then deep-throated, helping remove and frame Richard Nixon, the 37th President of the United States, because Nixon was not going to allow the criminal Federal Reserve to get in on the Chinese business. Item 3, George Herbert Walker Bush was involved in Iran-Contra, the sabotage of the attempt of the American military to rescue hostages, a rescue ordered by the 39th President of the United States, James L. Carter, so making the way so that he could become vice president.
And, of course, selling weapons to Iran and paying Bonnie Sardar $40 million and all the other things that went on, the president of Iran at the time.
Who was his stooge? And who was his stooge? His bagman, Mark Rich. And we'll get into the latest Mark Rich story a little bit later in the briefing. Then George Herbert Walker Bush, just 2 months into the presidency, the 40th President of the United States, Ronald Wilson Reagan, coordinated an attempt to assassinate with his family